Hi everybody. So I am a notorious procrastinator because I'm a perfectionist and I tend to put things off forever. And what I've done with this study hall project is I've decided just to do it, figure it out as it goes, and be okay with it being whatever it is. So all I'm doing here is I've got an iPhone, I'm sitting at my office talking. I'm sure I will add microphones and better cameras and setups and who knows what, but for now, this is it. We're gonna have a casual conversation and discuss things, and there will be different topics. Sometimes I'll do process videos, sometimes I will do the interviews, that'll be the main content. Um, Sometimes I will do a segment called The Comics That Made Me, where I just go through, similar to this, a comic book, and I get into the details of how that influenced me creatively. This time I'm talking about a creative influence of a different sort, which are art books, drawing, and relationships. So I received this book when I was made the trustee of the artwork of my friend Linda Sheets when she passed away. Linda was a very talented illustrator and musician. She was a lesbian and a feminist. She was a tradesperson. She was sort of a trailblazer in a lot of ways in her life. And I miss her a lot. And one of the things that was really wonderful was when I received all of her artwork, there was a large collection of ephemera, which we both had in common, our love of old ephemera. And that's something we bonded over, one of the many things. And so I got to go through this stuff, and my goal this year was to take her artwork, have shows, donate some, sell some, eventually sell all of it, take all of her ephemera, maybe get a booth in a nice shop somewhere and sell it. And the idea was to create something, a vehicle to talk about Linda, to share her story, and to also raise money for young women entering the arts, perhaps LGBTQ causes, perhaps programs that help young women get into the sciences, which is something our culture doesn't do a good job of promoting. So that was the plan. And the coronavirus happened, and all the plans have been waylaid, of course. But I'm still going to talk about her, and eventually those things will happen. So going through the ephemera, one of the things I found that I kept for myself was this wonderful old illustration life drawing book, Figures from Life by Walter T. Foster. I believe it's from the late 40s or 50s. I didn't Google it because it really doesn't matter, but based on the price point and the printing techniques, that's what I would think it was. Maybe probably the 50s, maybe late 40s. One of the things I really like about this is the printing techniques and the aesthetic it creates. What they did back then was they had this original graphite drawing that I'll show you in a minute. They laid it over, some canvas or something just to give it, some texture. This was then shot on an old stat camera. Stat cameras were 5 or 6 feet square. They had sort of an accordion body, and you could move it up or down to focus it and enlarge things. And it's the exact same equipment I used when I got to screen printing in the early 90s. And that's one of the things that made me fall in love with screen printing, was I was getting a connection to comics and pulp and printing, which were things that had already influenced me so much. So what they would have done is they had this picture, they laid it on the tarp, they took a stat camera shot, they then, they took 2 of them, and what they would do is they would just manually separate them. They'd cut out the part that was going to be red. That went on its own new sheet that they would tape down. Anything else red got taped in that spot. You had like a master file where you laid out the text by hand. You had rub-on letters you would use. You gridded it all out. You'd kind of lay it out, and then you would take the film that was the separations, make that line up. You had registration marks, and you would put those together to make your plates that got screened. Back then, they could go into the computer and make halftones of the screening process, and then you print it. And you had this wonderful after effect of a physical object where you have the red going behind the black for trapping, because these were all printed on big metal devices that sometimes weren't really accurate in their registration, or in the case of a project like this, it might have been printed a little cruder for cost, saving some money, making it more profitable. But it's a wonderful artifact. I love it, and I think the price point This would probably be the equivalent of a $15 or $20 art book now. So something that was affordable, but not a pamphlet. You open it up and boom, right away you get a really beautiful example of the cover drawing. As you can see, that's what they shot and turned into the red plate. You get some great initial instruction on blocking, basic proportions, knowing how many heads down, how far down the torso the chest should be. So right off the bat, you're getting some really good glimpses into what you're going to get out of this book. And a lot of people, myself included, will get intimidated by drawing because you get so hung up on a finished project, you forget what it really is. A lot of it's just gestural drawings, getting energy, that simple. That's informing a finished drawing later. You do have to have, obviously, a knowledge of rules of anatomy and movement, but it still all starts with all of this. And it's important to remind yourself of that from time to time, that it's a craft that you can learn, or some people can learn. But myself included, if I haven't been doing it for a while, I can get really intimidated. I can procrastinate doing projects and get really neurotic about it all. And this is really helpful to touch base with these things. It's not necessary to be able to draw a skeleton from memory, but it is necessary to know the way it works and the basic construction of it, because it informs your drawings. This is a beautiful drawing that is very simple, no real rendering at all. It's just a contour drawing, and you have this nice S shape that informs the spine. You can see the proportions that they're blocking out over here. But the real trick is every line here does a job very well. There's not wasted lines. It's very economical, and it's because of this knowledge. So when you see this leg, the left leg crossing the right leg, they know anatomy well enough that just these few lines make that a believable looking leg. And then a really good understanding of anatomy and perspective, then a couple of S curves, and you see the back of a heel. Same thing over here, you see the back of that heel, the under part of the shoe. And it makes it a beautiful drawing. And that knowledge really informs everything else. You can see where the drapery of the dress is indicated. But it's because they know how the body moves. And again, this is a beautiful sketch, but it's showing you how to block it out and keep things balanced. But it all starts off with just really simple grid work, lines indicating things. You know, a beautiful sketch like this, it's rendered and has a light source. You can see that and tell yourself, if you're a young artist, that's what you start with. You start with this. It's an oval, lines indicating where the body goes. The hip will pop up here. And really, without this doesn't matter. There are a lot of times I've drawn things that I know are garbage because I know enough about rendering I can make it look decent. But without this doesn't look good. It's not a good drawing. Again, just very simple gesture drawings that once rendered and detailed look like a beautiful lifelike figure. Great example of how, as complicated as the hand is to draw, it's still just a series of shapes. You know, there's a square, there's rectangles, cones, you kind of know where they bend. And once you break them down to the simplest shapes like that, it's a lot easier to do. It's a great example of anatomy informing perspective. So they knew they wanted to have this figure laid out. Well, since they know the shoulders go here, and they should line up with the inside of the hip, and so that informs them, well, she's going to lay along this vector we've created for perspective, so now I know where her body goes. One thing builds on the other. It's a good example of the female drawing here. This is very simple lines, but then you see it looks perfect. And a really great touch of not drawing a hip like it's just a ball. It's a body pushing down on it, so you see the flesh pushing out, and it makes it so much more believable. Another fine example here of very simple gesture drawing, very simple shape layout. The knowledge here of just, well, that's basically a circle and ellipse for the hips. Came done there. This It's a really beautiful drawing. The details in that face are really great. But, you know, it's just a triangle, curve for the back, very simple shape work. The knowledge of, well, the hip will connect down here at the bottom. You know, he or she, I think it was a he by the name, they didn't just draw this, it was constructed. And of course, once you get the foundation in this, which back in the day you had to, or you couldn't even get in the field, which is why that works so much more consistently good and skilled. Well, once you know this, then you can play around, and then you can make your choices, and that's what creates style. But having the foundation, this is really important. You know, even if you're cartooning these figures, exaggerating them, this knowledge really informs all of that. So if you want to make this look like Bluto from Popeye and you're blowing out these figures, it still has to have, even within the realm of a cartoon, it has to have a believable reality. The limbs have to look like they connect to the torso and that they work. And really, my favorite drawings to see, if it's an artist I follow, are construction drawings. I like rendering and seeing all that too, but it's really important to see the power in that. Sometimes you can just see a drawing that simple and you go, that's a really great drawing. You can see the indication of the eyes and the mouth, how the body moves. You don't have to be able to draw musculature from memory, but you do need to understand it, have a basic understanding. I could probably draw a facsimile of this, something pretty close but not exact. But knowing the basics, the way your shoulder pops out here, well, even if they're clothed, you need to know that. You need to know how to draw the folds in the shirt, indicate that muscle's pushing out. These are all just beautiful drawings. I love seeing all this. Back in the day, your entry point, if you wanted to be an illustrator, very often to building a career was being a fashion illustrator. And that was because they didn't just have the equipment, money to shoot everything. It wasn't like now where you could just shoot things so simply and you could Photoshop everything to death. So they would spend the money to hire someone to draw or to paint it. Sometimes they were watercolor drawings or gouache. But a lot of times, even the great mid-century ads I like so much, the reason why they look so good, they very often started with illustration. So they might have drawn it out so that when they got to the photography stage, there was no mistakes. They didn't waste money. So you had trained artists who understood about tangents, proper composition, and that way they were really informing the photography and making sure that it was correct because it was expensive. They had to make sure they got it right. And these are really nice little touches. You can see, like, okay, instead of thinking I have to draw this perfect looking female form, just remember it's a circle above a circle, you know, because there's a female body, it's rounder, and it's that simple. And that's really helpful for me to remember because sometimes I can get in my own head about this stuff. But it's a really beautiful booklet and a really great memento from a good friend that I miss a lot. Thanks for watching. Bye.